The house had stood closed for 60 years, sealed not just by locks and boards, but by silence itself. It sat at the very edge of the village, where the dirt road thinned into grass and then disappeared into forest. No one lived near it anymore. Even the birds seemed to avoid its roof, which sagged slightly in the middle like the back of an old man who had carried too much for too long. I had heard about the house since childhood. Every village has a place like this, a building people talk about in lowered voices, usually at night, usually after a second or third glass of something strong. Some said the owners left suddenly and never returned. Others claimed no one ever left at all. Children dared each other to run up and touch the door, then sprint back screaming. Adults laughed at the stories, but none of them ever tried to go inside. The key, as it turned out, had been hanging in the village council office all this time. On a crooked nail, and labeled, "Forgotten." When I asked about it, the old clerk squinted at me as if trying to remember whether the house or I had existed longer. "No one's asked for that key in decades," he said. "If you really want it, take it. Just bring it back." The metal was cold and heavier than I expected. It felt less like a key and more like a warning. The walk to the house took less than 15 minutes, but it felt longer. The closer I got, the quieter everything became. The wind that had been moving through the trees seemed to die out, as if unwilling to follow me further. The air smelled different too, thick and stale, like a room that had never been opened. The front door was solid oak, darkened by age, its surface cracked like dry earth. Someone had nailed planks across it long ago, but the nails were rusted and loose. I pried them away one by one, each creak sounding far too loud in the stillness. When I finally put the key into the lock, it resisted, then turned with a deep, reluctant click. The door opened inward. The smell hit first. Not rot, not mold exactly, but something older. Dust, dried wood, cold stone, and underneath it all, the faint trace of something organic, like old fabric or paper that had absorbed the breath of people long gone. Light spilled in, cutting a pale rectangle across the floor. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The sound echoed through the house in a way that made it clear just how empty it was. Or how empty it was supposed to be. The entryway was narrow, with a coat rack still standing against the wall. On it hung a single coat, gray and heavy, its shoulders slumped as if someone invisible were still wearing it. I touched the sleeve, half expecting it to fall apart in my hand, but the fabric held. 60 years, and it was still there. Shoes were lined neatly beneath the rack. Men's boots, women's shoes, even a small pair that could only have belonged to a child. They were covered in dust, but positioned carefully, toes facing outward, as if waiting. I moved further in. The living room opened up slowly, revealing furniture covered not by sheets, but by time itself. A table stood in the center, set for a meal. Plates, glasses, cutlery, all still in place. On one plate, something dark and unrecognizable clung stubbornly to the porcelain. I leaned closer and realized, with a chill, that it had once been bread. The chairs were pulled out, not pushed in. One of them had fallen backward, lying on the floor as if someone had stood up too quickly and never sat down again. A clock hung on the wall. Its hands were frozen at 3:17. I checked my watch, then my phone. The signal was gone. The battery, which had been full minutes ago, now showed almost empty. I told myself it was coincidence. Old houses do strange things. Old places play tricks on the mind. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had arrived in the middle of something, not after it. The kitchen was worse. Pots sat on the stove, their lids askew. Inside one, the remains of soup had dried into a cracked, grayish crust. A knife lay on the cutting board beside a half-chopped onion, its layers shriveled but still recognizable. Flies, long dead, dotted the windowsill. Someone had been cooking. Someone had been interrupted. On the wall hung a calendar. The date was circled in red. I wiped away the dust to read it clearly. It was from 60 years ago. The very year the house was said to have closed forever. The bedrooms were upstairs. The staircase groaned under my weight, each step protesting as if it resented being used again. At the top, a narrow hallway stretched out, lined with doors. The first room belonged to a child. Toys lay scattered across the floor. Wooden blocks, a small train, a doll with one glass eye missing. The bed was unmade, the blanket half on the floor. On the wall, drawings were pinned with yellowed tacks. Houses, trees, stick figures holding hands. One drawing stood apart from the rest. It showed a house, darker than the others, with all the windows blacked out. Around it were figures without faces. I felt a tightening in my chest that had nothing to do with dust. The next room was a bedroom for 2 adults. The bed was neatly made, the pillows fluffed. On the bedside table lay a pair of glasses and a book, open face down, as if someone had been reading and simply stopped. The bookmark was a photograph. I picked it up carefully. It showed the family standing in front of the very house I was in. A man, a woman, and a child. They were smiling, but something about the image felt wrong. Their expressions were too stiff, too forced. The child's eyes, in particular, seemed to be looking past the camera, towards something just out of frame. Toward me. The last door at the end of the hallway was locked. Unlike the front door, this lock looked newer, as if someone had reinforced it at the last moment. The key I had didn't fit. I tried anyway, pushing and twisting until my fingers hurt, but it wouldn't budge. That was when I heard it. A sound from below. Soft, deliberate, footsteps. I froze, listening. There was no doubt about it. Someone was moving around. My rational mind scrambled for explanations. Animals. Wind. The house settling. But none of those sounded like the slow, careful steps I heard crossing the living room floor. I backed away from the locked door and returned to the staircase. Halfway down, I stopped. The front door was open. Light poured in, brighter than before, and silhouetted a figure standing just inside the threshold. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The figure looked like a man, tall and thin, dressed in clothes that belonged to another era. His face was in shadow, but I could feel his eyes on me. "You're late," he said. His voice was calm, almost disappointed. I opened my mouth to speak, to ask who he was, how he had gotten in, what this place was, but no sound came out. He stepped aside, gesturing toward the living room. "We've been waiting," he continued. I wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to flee, to get out of the house and never look back. But my legs didn't move. Instead, I found myself descending the last few steps and walking past him, as if pulled by invisible strings. The living room was no longer empty. The chairs were occupied. The family from the photograph sat around the table. The man at the head, the woman beside him, the child swinging their legs beneath the chair. They all looked up as I entered. Their faces were pale, almost translucent, but solid enough to be unmistakably real. "You can sit there," the woman said gently, pointing to the empty chair. I shook my head. "I don't understand," I managed to whisper. The man sighed. "No one ever does, at first." The child smiled at me. Up close, I could see that their eyes were wrong. "Too deep, too old." "We didn't leave," the child said. "We stayed." The room grew colder. The man explained, or tried to. About the house. About promises made and broken. About how some places don't let go of the people who belong to them. How the doors had been locked not to keep others out, but to keep something in. Time passed, he said. The village forgot, but the house remembered. I felt my heart pounding so hard it hurt. "Why show me this?" I asked. "Why now?" The woman looked at the man, then back at me. Her smile was sad. "Because the lock is weakening," she said. "And someone has to take our place." The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "No," I said. "That's not possible." The man stood, his chair scraping softly across the floor. "It is," he said. "And it always has been." The figure from the doorway appeared beside him. In the light, I could finally see his face. It was mine. Older, thinner, eyes hollowed by years of waiting. I staggered back, my mind screaming in denial. "This isn't real." "It will be," my double replied quietly. "It already is." The house began to creak and groan, the walls flexing as if breathing. Dust fell from the ceiling like gray snow. The clock on the wall twitched, then began to move again. 3:18. I felt something tug at me, not physically, but deeper. A pulling sensation in my chest, in my memories, in my sense of self. Images flooded my mind. Years passing without movement, seasons changing outside windows I never opened, footsteps that were mine and not mine, waiting. Waiting for someone else. I screamed and broke free, bolting for the front door. The family shouted after me, their voices overlapping, urgent but not angry. The doorway seemed farther away than before, the room stretching unnaturally. I reached the threshold and threw myself outside. The door slammed shut behind me. I lay in the grass, gasping, my whole body shaking. The house stood silent once more, its windows dark, its door closed as if it had never opened. When I finally forced myself to stand, the key was no longer in my pocket. I ran back to the village without looking back. Later, when I tried to explain what I had seen, no one believed me. They nodded politely, smiled thinly, and told me old houses inspire imagination. The clerk at the council office frowned when I asked about the key. "What key?" he said. Days passed, then weeks. At night, I began to dream of the house, of sitting at the table, of the clock ticking, of footsteps upstairs. This morning, I woke up with dust on my clothes and the smell of old wood in my hair. And in my pocket was a key. Cold, heavy, waiting.